So, park with me here for a little bit. We're going to talk about a couple of things. So, hopefully, this is a time when you have a break and from life, from inquiry, and you can soak some of this in. Healing is the topic. It's funny because I'm like, I look at myself in the camera, but there you are. If I look at that, that's a red dot. The funny things about doing videos, sorry. First thing I want to say about healing is that as you start to reverse the repression of whatever that is, it's going to trigger people. You being yourself will trigger other people. It may not seem like that would make any sense, but that's exactly what triggers people because they can't be themselves. So when you're being yourself, it's like a shadow for them. Whether you're expressing anger, which they can't express, or sadness, which they can't express, or fear or shame that they can't, it's a shadow. So it's almost a perfect setup for a trigger. When people are healing, they have to deal with more shit from people. It's just part of the process. And a lot of the times it's totally innocent. It's not like there's anybody to blame. It's just shadows. It's nobody's right or wrong. It's just somebody does or says something that hits a button because it's too close to one's own repression. What this can do when you're in the healing process is it kind of slow you down because, it gives you more to process, right? Inside out path. So let's say you're reversing repression and you start being yourself and somebody gets upset. Well, do you stop and people please them? Oh, I'm sorry. How did I hurt you by being myself? There might be something that you would say. Maybe you did do something. Maybe you said something that was insensitive. There's certainly a time for owning up to certain things, but be careful because as you're coming out of repression, a lot of it will just be you're being yourself because the trigger is in the person who's repressing emotion. See, if you're actually just being yourself and you're not being mean because you have unconsciousness, like that's another thing as we come out of repression, sometimes there's still unconsciousness that makes us identify with the anger as we reverse the repression or to identify with the sadness. We have to work at that level too, not just reversing the repression, but any unconsciousness that makes us identify with something. In any event, as you come out of repression, just get ready because just by being yourself, not by doing anything necessarily, people are going to get triggered because of the shadow quality. And so the question is, it's really for you. It's your work to do when people get triggered by your authenticity, because it's like it's either pulling you back into sort of people pleasing or repression response, like feeling bad about being yourself, hold yourself back, feel ashamed about what you did, or process that and stand in your own experience. And meaning, if there's a trigger there for you, you can process it, right? So they're just reflecting something back. As you start to be yourself, if somebody gets triggered by that, they might reflect like there still could be a deficiency story for you. And we know that deficiency stories are connected to repression. So when somebody gets triggered by you coming out of repression, all that is for you is grist for the mill. It's more food for you, if you will, for the transformative process or fuel. But if you don't process it, the trigger, think about it this way, if you're a repressor, the trigger coming from repression could take you back into shutdown so that you're not feeling and allowing and expressing your emotions. It's very easy. So the rubber meets the road right there. As we go into the inside out path, it's going to be harder for us to relate to people. You'll see it. It's very innocent, but it's like more and more you want to just have authentic relationships. You just want to express. That's one thing about coming out of repression is like, how you think and feel about everything. You always knew. See, we always know how we think and feel, but the repression of emotion obscures it and covers it up. So as you clear out the congestion of that, what you think and feel is already there. Now, a lot of the identification with what you think and feel was coming from the repression. holding yourself back and identifying in some way. So when you clear the repression, there's just what you think and feel, but you're not really necessarily identified with it. And if you are, you can do other work with that, just presence work. So we just get to be ourselves as part of the healing, and other people are not going to like that. And they will never, ever, ever say that I'm triggered because you're being yourself. They're not going to see it that way. I don't know, they might, but I doubt it. More likely, it's going to be something like this. So coming out of anger repression, being in relationship to other anger repressors, what I noticed is they wouldn't speak up. They wouldn't say what they need. They would subvert their needs and wants in favor of just being quiet and going along with. So by not speaking their needs, it's like I'm having to guess what it is that you're thinking and feeling. And then it's like walking into a trap because the person isn't expressing to you how they feel. So it's like a setup. Eventually, you're going to walk right into that trap because they're not telling you anything. And that's what makes it a setup. If they could just say, you know, how you're showing up, it bothers me. I'll just tell you exactly why. A, B, C. Then there's nothing left. You know what I mean? Nothing is hiding. And so in that communication, you can hear it and go, oh, okay, so now I know how you think and feel. And then I might have a response to that. I might agree with it or disagree with it or whatever. But until the anger repressor says that, the other person is left just to fall into the trigger, fall into the trap a lot of times. And when there's sadness repression, they're not expressing the hurt. So that's a song and dance in a different way. And you'll feel like both of these are kind of snake in the grass, the feeling of being in a relationship with someone like that, because you know that they're hurt or they're angry, but they're not telling you. And then if you are reversing your repression, they're still hurt or angry and not telling you. The only difference is you're coming out of repression, so you can see it more. So one of the things I've been saying to people as you start taking more shit from people, which it will happen, trust me, is start speaking to people differently. It took me a while to start to learn this. But basically, when I'm with somebody who's repressing anger, I have to remember what that was like. What that's like is I can't actually say, I don't really know what I want. That's the problem. That's why I did that video, What Do You Really Want, on YouTube recently. Because anger repressors have great difficulty with that, and they don't know that they have great difficulty with that. They're often not really aware of it. They've been living like this their whole lives. So if you ask them, well, what do you want to do here? Especially on a serious topic, it'll be either shut down or like, well, and it takes them a while to get it out because they're repressing their voice and themselves and their anger. But I think if you're in a relationship to anger repressors and you're coming out of repression, whatever that is, you can talk to them differently. I'm learning to talk to people differently, understanding what's going on more. And it would be more like, but what are you, tell me if getting my love or my approval in this conversation was not even part of it, what do you think it is that you would want? And then that might start the ball, but even then they're not going to be able to say it because they're operating on the unconscious need for approval, holding the anger back. But at least it can open the door a little bit so they can start sharing. But a lot of times with anger repressors, even when we start sharing, we're not clear. So because we beat around the bush, we don't want to be really direct, right? I know this very well. It's not me anymore, but I know it well. And so by not being direct, when you're in a relationship with an anger repressor, you have to kind of pull it out a little bit. Like, so when you say this, do you mean you don't want to do that? You don't want to go visit family on Easter? Because what the anger repressor might say is, well, you know, last year when we were there, I noticed that your uncle Bob did this. And they might not even say that they don't like that I'm angry at Bob. They might not say that, but it's like innuendo. You just have to fish for more answers, you know, because it's the wishy-washiness of us anger repressors. So you might say, so is what you're saying is that you don't want to go? to Easter at Bob's house. Is that what you're saying? Eventually, if they feel safe enough, they'll share it. They'll say, yes, I don't think I want to go. But see, that doesn't feel safe for an anger repressor to really speak directly. So you have to almost, you don't have to, but it'd be good if you create the atmosphere where that can happen. And if you don't, an anger repressor who doesn't feel safe can very easily get triggered and store anger towards you and not tell you. Yeah. And then hurt repressions, that's my husband. I've learned how to talk to him. Still learning. I don't know it all. It's always life is constant learning and discovery. But here's what I've seen so far is totally, totally innocent, like anger repressors, like so much innocent. I love you all. I love us. I love us because we're actually innocent of all of this. We cannot help it. But so he gets angry, not as much anymore at all. But when he used to get really angry to cover up the hurt, I had to try to talk to him about the hurt. But that was very difficult because he wasn't really in the process with me. So that's another thing is like you might be in a relationship where the other person is just not going to show up at all. In which case I divorced Chester, where we got back together when he started to open up to some of the stuff going on for him. So it's very different now. Now I can talk to him, but he still has hurt repression, but he's much more open to it. He's doing amazing things. I wish I could get him on here someday and he could tell you the hell he's been through and how he avoided the trauma for so long and the shit that happened from that. And then what happened when he started focusing on himself. Because now he's showing up differently. And when he is repressing hurt, so when I see him angry or anxious, there's an indication of it. Slowly I want to talk about what's bothering him, but not so much just like the side where he gets angrier, because the anger is like fuel. It's almost intoxicating sometimes for sadness repressors because it's safe. So I don't want to fuel the anger. I've learned not to do that because that also fuels his anxiety. His anxiety is the fear of feeling the sadness or hurt. So what I do is just love him and listen and talk about the pain of that he's feeling, how what somebody did wasn't right and it hurt him, but the thing is he's already picking it up on his own. I don't really have to do much, because he's so open already to finding the hurt and fear on his own. But if I do talk to him, what I have to do is I have to process my anger, because coming out of repression, I don't repress it. But my anger is not hiding hurt. A lot of times I can share the hurt too, if I need to, because I didn't really ever repress hurt or even the fear. Now, I couldn't always do that. Any of those emotions. Hurt has always been easier for me. So there's just that on just talking to each other. Maybe you never thought about how, if you're with somebody who represses, how you talk to them matters. I mean, here's the wrong way. There's no right or wrong, but here's a way that I've found doesn't work. Is if I'm with a sadness repressor, I don't even want to say this doesn't work because I'm not even sure about that. The sadness repressor gets really angry. I was going to say anger doesn't work. Well, it just, because you can't go any more vulnerable than that. Two people angry at each other, it's like, where do we go from here? Well, somebody has to be open to vulnerability. But if both parties are just going at each other in anger, it might not go anywhere. It depends on whether somebody's going to process beyond the anger, is what I've learned. It's just like those moments when you're arguing with somebody and you have a moment of vulnerability and it changes the course of the thing. Anger does have a purpose. If you've noticed, like, it's actually a very valuable emotion because it makes you pay attention to something that's going on, or it makes somebody else pay attention to something that they're not paying attention to. It's a power emotion. It's been actually very helpful, extremely helpful in my relationship to be able to access anger. This is also part of the healing process for an anger repressor. I've noticed I think many of us anger repressors, we have it backwards. We don't necessarily think of allowing anger as being critical for our healing and awakening, but it 100% is, because it's the repression, it's the trauma. So we might have to do some inquiry on the idea that allowing anger is somehow not healing, or that it's bad because that's what keeps it repressed. Oh, maybe I can just talk about that to help. Well, this is also true of all repressions. When you start to allow the primary repression, everything starts changing. Everything starts changing in your life. Just wait. Because this is the missing key. This is the missing experience. This is also the missing experience on the path for a lot of people. So you could be spinning your wheels for many years and you don't really see any substantive changes on the human level. You might have more awareness or something, but the human is still doing what the human has always done. But when you start doing repression and trauma work, it just starts shifting immediately and continues to shift. And that's what I'm calling the healing. It's making the repression conscious, bringing it into awareness in all these different situations, inside and out. Or inside out, meaning all forms of suffering point back to the repression. Okay, but anger is healing for anger repressors. But here's the thing. If you're in anger repression, you're not in a position to be disagreeing with me. Because of course you would, right? Because you're repressing anger. You have every reason to try to stay safe around anger. That's not an objective thing. Like, you're not going to be able to contribute to this conversation too much because you're in repression. But I'm here to tell you that coming out of repression, anger is actually very healing, extremely healing. But I don't mean putting anger on people. I just mean feeling and allowing anger, and being able to express anger is what's healing. Sometimes even putting anger on somebody is healing, though, because it's hard to explain. If it's authentic, it's authentic. You know, if it's a coping mechanism, that's different. If I'm getting angry at you because I'm afraid to open to my fear or my hurt, that's different. But if I'm getting angry in some clean way where only that emotion will work, I don't know that I'm doing it, but it's like, that's the only emotion that will work. Like, you're kicking my dog. Fear is not going to work. You're going to keep kicking my dog. Feeling hurt, not going to work probably. But God fucking damn it, stop kicking my dog works. That works. See, there's a reason for we have that emotion. But that's not even the healing part. Of course, that's healing to be able to express yourself. But the healing part of the anger is making the mind-body connection conscious. Both the thoughts and feelings that I am angry and that I can't feel or express it, that's what's healing right there. And when that starts to come into awareness, that's when energy in the body starts transmuting and changing. And when that changes, that stuckness in relationship around repression starts to open up, just like the energy in the body starts to open up. They're basically the same thing. So repression starts opening or dissolving. Those areas of repression in relationships start changing. That's why I said you can expect changes quickly here, but not coming out of repression quickly, but just doing some inquiry opens things up for you. And that's what keeps us in the process of healing, I think, because healing really is a process and it's not a straight line. To quote Casey Musgraves, healing isn't a straight line. I even heard people say it's like going up a mountain, because you have to circle back to certain programs or certain repression over and over again until you're able to move up. You keep circling back. That feels like a better description of it than we just get healed all of a sudden or something. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll take a little break here.